Ladies and gentlemen, this was a first. As far as I know, we have never had a lecture introduced by somebody improvising on the piano. Lucy, we thank you very, very much. This was great. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to the American Academy in Berlin. I'm Gerhard Kasper, its president. And those who have been here before know the routine. My main function, other than what I have just performed, welcoming you, is to say 3 words about the person who will introduce our speaker. We have always somebody from Germany doing that, and tonight we have a particularly distinguished and interesting person, Annette Mühlberg, who is in charge really of digitalization and technology more generally at Verdi, the very large German union for mostly service workers, though I learned over dinner that printers and wallpaper hangers also belong to it. Now, Ms. Mühlberg had a very distinguished career. She studied at the Goethe University in Frankfurt, and indeed I asked her whether she was from Frankfurt, and she said emphatically, yes, indeed. And then she immediately fell into talking Frankfurterisch to me, which for somebody from the free and Hanseatic city of Hamburg is not easy to understand. But she did a marvelous job at it. Ms. Mühlberg, as I said, has a very major role at Verdi, the union, in terms of net politics and e-government. But she said to me very charmingly, forget that, strike charmingly. She said to me very appropriately, as we talked earlier, that her main concern in dealing with these types of issues was what it meant for democracy and power and control in a democratic country like Germany. So all of this is very impressive, and you can see why she was chosen to introduce Steven Hill. But the really interesting thing about her resume is something altogether different. After the Abitur, after she graduated from high school, she went to Seattle with a friend, got a bicycle, and cycled all the way down to San Francisco on number 1. And then, however, she fell for some kind of got into somebody's car and went to the Mexican border. I pointed out to her that actually this way she skipped the most beautiful part of number 1, the between San Francisco and Santa Barbara, but she disagreed with me. She said, come on, whom are you kidding? The first part was just fine. And so it is your task now.
Well then, thank you for this warm introduction. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight I have the pleasure of introducing the American Academy's Holtzbrinck Fellow Steven Hill. I'm especially pleased to welcome him here to Germany, since he is one of the leading experts in the United States on the impact of technology on jobs and the labor force, and in particular on what is known as the sharing or gig economy. He's based in San Francisco, in the heart of Silicon Valley, and so it is very helpful to hear from him about the impacts of the new technologies and extreme digitalization on jobs and the labor force. His observations and insights, told in his books and other writings, is helping us here in Germany to learn from the US experience and hopefully avoid some mistakes. We are happy to have a fruitful exchange with one of the experts in this field and to learn from the positive strategies that Steven is proposing. I first met Steven last November in New York City at a conference at the New School for Social Research on the Digital Economy, where we both were speakers. Besides the usual stimulating comments of the type you are about to hear from Steven, our new relationship was established on somewhat unusual grounds. He helped me financially when my digital money, otherwise known as credit card, suddenly failed. I needed to take a bus to Boston, and the bus company would only accept a credit card for payment. It would not accept cash. It was Sunday, of course. Over breakfast in our hotel, I broke the bad news to Steven, and we figured out an arrangement. I found out that he was going to be a fellow here in Berlin. He would purchase my bus ticket using his credit card, and I would pay him in euros. Our new relationship was cemented over the failure of digital economy and transatlantic financial solidarity. Steven's professional career has had a few stages. In his early adult years, Steven worked as a community organizer, just like Obama. His activities in the late 1980s included working with the United Farm Workers of Cesar Chavez, which, with Steven's help, won the first farm worker contract in the history of Washington state. Then, in the early 1990s, he became more involved in electoral politics in the United States. That soon led to co-founding the Center for Voting and Democracy, now known as Fair Vote, which was dedicated to enacting political reforms. In the mid-2000s, he was asked to establish a political reform program for the New America Foundation, a well-known think tank based in Washington, D.C. During those years, Steven led campaigns to pass a number of important reforms, including for public financing of campaigns, electoral system reforms, and lowering the voter registration age to 17. I may add that for German, these are reforms. Registration age is a difficult issue to us to understand, because here you don't have the problem. You get post, now it's time, please go, elect. So I think, that would be also a possibility. But all the while that Steven was organizing and strategizing for political reform, he also was wearing another hat, that of a writer and researcher. He is now the author of 6 books of political nonfiction. His book, Raw Deal, How the Uber Economy and Runaway Capitalism Are Screwing American Workers, published by St. Martin's Press last October, was selected by The Globalist as one of the top 10 books of 2015. And again, here is something that might be surprising to you, but for us it is surprising how clearly outspoken language Americans are using in concern of the problems, what are happening. We are rather moderate in our language in comparison. So, but that might be due to the fact that the impacts of digitalization are not as bad yet. So maybe we can do something about it, learn from each other to avoid these problems. His previous books include the internationally praised Europe's Promise, Why the European Way is the Best Hope in an Insecure Age. Well, that sounds great to us, which was published by the University of California Press in January 2010, as well as 10 Steps to Repair American Democracy and Fixing Elections, the Failure of America's Winner-Take-All Politics. And today is a special day, because just today, May 10th, his newest book Expand Social Security Now. How to Ensure Americans Get the Retirement They Deserve has been published in the United States. Steven is a prolific writer and commentator who has been widely published and quoted in media around the world. His articles and op-eds have appeared in the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, The Atlantic, Financial Times, Guardian, Die Zeit, Handelsblatt, Tagesspiegel, The Nation, Al Jazeera, Le Monde, and many other leading publications. Steven also has been interviewed by many leading media outlets, including CNN, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, C-SPAN, BBC, Bloomberg Business, Fox News, National Public Radio, and all around Europe, France, Greece, Turkey, Poland, everywhere. And he has lectured widely in the United States and Europe to business, government, policy institutes, universities, and NGOs, including the European Commission, UK House of Commons, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Greek government, the Hannover Messe Trade Fair, Republika, where we just met again, Conference on Internet and Society, various political groups and parties in the European Parliament, Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, German Marshall Fund, Brookings Institution, Stanford, Harvard, Princeton, Georgetown, Columbia, UC Berkeley. Now I have to tell them all because you make UCLA, and now I can relax, Humboldt and Freie Universität in Berlin, among others. Besides being an author, a co-founder of Fair Vote, a senior fellow at the New America Foundation, and a Holtzbrinck Fellow at the American Academy, Steven also writes plays, fiction and poetry, all paints, and composes and plays music. And I think there must be something about you too. The music issue is a special issue. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Steven.
Uh-oh, my mic just fell off, but maybe I don't need this one. Hold on. Joachim, it fell off. How's it go? All right, can you hear me through one mic or another? Yes. Can everybody hear me? Great. I want to turn this somehow. Well, thank you, Annetta, for that wonderful introduction, and Gerhard, thank you also, and for the leadership you've provided to this fine institution that has been a great home for me for 5 months. And also to the wonderful staff here. I mean, every fellow has outdone themselves in praising the staff, and there's too many to name, but it really has been just a wonderful place to be, a great intellectual community. The staff here are so supportive and so helpful in so many ways. So thank you to everyone for everything that you've done over these last 4.5 months. You know, things like getting articles translated, getting them placed in places like the Handelsblatt, and I mean, it's just been a great help here. So I can't thank you enough. The topic tonight is, can you hear me in there? Okay. Hi. Just about? Okay. I'll try to keep it loud. The topic tonight is, when I started writing about this subject and researching about it, I think it's fair to say that, I'm from San Francisco, so I was steeped in a lot of the new changes going on in the digital economy. It was all around me, but it was appreciating it both on the consumer side, some of the benefits, but then also, seeing friends I know, friends of mine being evicted to make way for Airbnb tourist hotels and all these sorts of things. And so it really was, it kind of snuck up on me. This technology and the way that it's changing our society, it happens so slowly in a sense that it's really hard to really assess what's happening. And only over time does the picture start coming into view. And does it start to crystallize in a way that we can get a sense of the new the newness that's there, and both the positives and the negatives. And we're going to be challenged over the next 10, 15 to 20 years to make some really tough decisions. Our values are going to be challenged as we try to assess how some of these new technologies, are they beneficial? Are they going to help us? Or are they going to somehow, make our societies more unequal? Are they going to somehow get rid of jobs instead of creating jobs? These are important questions, and there's as many people out there with their crystal balls out trying to divine the future as there are so-called experts. And I come at this not from a viewpoint of a technological expert, which I'm not. I'm a journalist, and I interviewed a ton of people, listened to a lot of different points of view, and from there wrote a book to try and make sense of this for a general public. What we understand as the new economy, the digital economy, is a convergence of three factors that are really game changers. The first one is high-speed internet, which we all know about. The second one are smartphones. And the third one is big data, or what they call the cloud. What is the cloud? The cloud is, how many people here have used on your smartphones, have used your voice recognition, where you hit the little button and you talk into it? So some have, but some have not. I've been using voice recognition on my computer since the 90s because I've had problems with repetitive strain injury from being on computers too much. And, the way voice recognition used to work is that you would load onto your computer a computer program, and it would come with a huge vocabulary. And that every time you turn on your computer and turn on that piece of software, it would load that vocabulary into RAM, the memory, so that when you were speaking, it would be accessing the memory, the RAM, to recognize your speech, and then to take the words that you said and put them down onto your computer. Remarkable technology. But that's not how the voice recognition on your smartphones work anymore. Now, when you talk to that, it's accessing this thing called the cloud. And it's every time when you speak, it's sort of wherever this cloud is, right? It's accessing that, and it's going back and forth between you and the cloud, That's why some of you, if you've seen, sometimes it'll type out what you say, and then all of a sudden it starts taking the words back, because it's actually making a voice profile of you. And it is keeping that voice profile on record, and it's matching what you're saying with what they have about you in the cloud. And so this is just a tip of the spear, so to speak, of what the cloud does and what it's going to be able to do. You can think of it in terms of, I call it phones, drones, and bones. Phones, I've already spoken about, these revolutions in communication. Drones, not only drones in warfare, but drones in our private lives. In San Francisco, I live close to the beach, and you can go down there at any given day, and there's these guys there with their drones, and they're flying them around, and they've mounted a little GoPro camera, video camera on top of it, and people are laying there on the beach, and they don't realize 6 feet above them is a drone with a video camera that's taking video of them. These drones are also used. They're used by agricultural specialists, where they can see how much dryness is in the ground from above. You can't see that from 30,000 feet. You can only see that from maybe a couple of hundred feet. So there's really has not been a technology that easily could fly at that level. So the drones have a lot of pros and cons to them, and we have to really think about how we're going to regulate those. And bones, is about that there's enormous breakthroughs in medical technology. They're using some of this technology to restore sight to the partially blind. There's at the University of California, San Francisco, which is a huge medical center, there's an enormous machine that's about 5 times the size of that grand piano, and it's got all these pneumatic tubes on it, like elephant trunks. And what it does is it can pick up pills. And it can take those pills and put them in a plastic bag and slap a barcode on it. It fills prescriptions, 10,000 prescriptions a day. There goes your local pharmacist. They won't be needed very, very much longer. So these technologies are powerful. They have awesome capability. that we have to really embrace to a certain degree. I also have to add that they have now software that can write sports stories and stock market stories, and can take any type of data set and take the numbers and turn them into a story. And they ask people, who wrote this? Is it a robot or is it a live human? And people can't really tell. So journalists like myself, someday instead of listening to me, there'll be a robot here in my place telling you about itself. So these are incredibly profound changes, but the most profound change of all that is coming is in how we work. Because that really strikes at the core of who we are as people, as communities, as families, is how we work and how we will make our livings. This to me is going to be the most profound change at all. In some ways, it's a grand experiment that we are all going to undergo here, and it's all going to happen over the next 20 years, more or less, and it's going to happen in our lifetimes. And we were going to look back on this time, and in some ways, the motivation for writing my book, Raw Deal, was I didn't want us to look back and say, wow, we didn't get that right. We didn't put the right constraints around these technologies, and now look at what we've walked into. So now there are pros to these new ways of working, using technology to access work through apps and websites and other types of means. Some of the pros are, if you are someone who wants flexible work and you don't want a full-time job, you now have another means to find work. And for some people, if you have children, you have a family, you can't take a full-time job, but you can work part-time, you want a flexible schedule. It does provide some benefits in that regard. It's also very efficient at matching workers with short-term jobs. And it's also, we like to talk about what's called labor market insiders and labor market outsiders. The insiders are the ones that tend to get the full-time, good-paying jobs with benefits and such, and the outsiders are the ones who can't. And the outsiders tend to be young people, minorities, immigrants, women to a certain extent are still labor market outsiders. For labor market outsiders, it does give them another way to access work. So I think these are I think we want to think about these benefits and think about how to maximize the good that's there with some of the downsides, which I now am going to talk about a little bit. The other aspect of a lot of these are coming online in the aftermath of the 2008 Great Recession, as we call it in the United States. When the housing markets around the world collapsed, and we all know what happened. So a lot of these are coming online in this aftermath. So you have to understand that it's creating some opportunity for people who aren't finding other opportunities in the economy. What happened in that collapse is that a lot of the good jobs that were there for many years, that had decent pay, that had a safety net, healthcare, and these sorts of things, especially in the United States, where the social security system is not as developed as it is here in Germany. Those are the jobs that went away. And the ones that have come back are lower paying jobs that don't have safety net protections. A lot of them are part-time. In fact, a fifth of the new jobs that have been created in the United States are temp jobs. And about half of the new jobs created pay barely minimum wage. So the new jobs during this so-called recovery have not kept pace with what the needs of people are. But beyond that, more and more workers have become freelancers, contractors, and temp workers. The U.S. in many ways is becoming what I call a freelance society, where more and more workers are accessing work through this way. And more and more workers don't have the full-time job. Now they have the part-time job, or maybe two part-time jobs. This is a big change. And it doesn't show any signs of reversing itself anytime soon during the middle of this so-called recovery. Now, these jobs, the wages are lower. As I mentioned, they already have a weaker safety net. There's no assurance of future work. Employers, the advantage of employers by hiring these sorts of workers is in the United States, they save about 30% on labor costs because you're not paying for things like health care, Social Security, Medicare. You're not even paying for injured worker compensation. You don't, a lot of these workers that are working this way, whether they're Uber drivers or even working for big companies, Microsoft and auto companies, they don't have, a lot of them don't have injured worker compensation. If they get injured, they're responsible for it. So you have companies like Merck. This is happening both in the traditional economy as well as in what we call the gig or sharing economy. A company like Merck is a huge pharmaceutical company. They had a plant in Philadelphia. They sold that plant to another company. The company laid off all 400 workers and then hired back the exact same 400 workers as contractors rather than regularly employed. And by doing that, they get out of all these labor costs. Auto companies. If you go to an auto plant in the United States today, about 50% of the workers in that plant are going to be temp workers. They're going to be working alongside workers who work directly for the company. They're doing the exact same job, but they're getting about half the pay. They really have very little safety net, and they're temp workers, so they have no job security. University professors. So it's not just blue-collar work that this is happening to. University professors, the trend in universities is to hire more adjunct faculty, more assistant and associate professors instead of full-time professors, to not give tenure. Adjunct faculty are basically temp workers. That's what they are, because they have no contract beyond the class that they're teaching in many cases. And they don't really have the intellectual freedom to teach how they want, because to get that contract renewed, they're going to have to keep their department chair quite happy. So it's been happening in the traditional economy for some time, but now the gig economy and the sharing economy, as it's called, makes it even easier. These technologies of web and app-based labor brokerages are making it even easier to hire and fire. So you have companies, for example, like Upwork. How many people have heard of Upwork? Few, not too many. Well, this is a company you want to know about because someday you may be getting work on it. Upwork is a company based in San Francisco, part of the so-called sharing economy. It has about 250 regular employees, and those 250 employees oversee 10 million freelancers all around the world. They can use technology to keep track of these freelancers, and these freelancers are doing jobs like architects, engineers, lawyers, but also translators, computer programmers, graphic designers, logo designers, just about any type of job that can be done at a distance, you can find on the Upwork platform. Artists, you can hire an artist anywhere to do a painting for you if you tell them what you want. So what distinguishes Upwork, besides the ratio of regular employees to freelancers, is that you have workers from all over the world who are on this platform. So you can look on this platform and you can see that there's a worker from Germany saying, I'd like to make about 70 euros an hour for this job. There's a worker from the United States saying, I'd like to make, $80 an hour. And from Canada, Australia, Japan, all, at that same level. And then there's workers from Thailand, India, Philippines saying, I'll take 2 euros an hour to do this job. And you can watch all these workers bidding for the jobs, and you can see the bids going lower and lower and lower. It's basically an online auction, a labor auction. And it's an auction in which, more often than not, the lowest bid wins. You all looking a little glum right now. But it is, this is Upwork, and it's a race to the bottom, basically. And there are other brokerages like this, TaskRabbit in the United States. There are some here in Germany, ClickWorker, JobApper. There's one in Belgium that just started called ListMinute. These are all online labor brokerages in which these sorts of online auction dynamics are what's driving the labor markets. Many businesses today, they want a workforce that they can turn on and off like the latest Netflix movie. Right? That's what they want. And so this really undermines the social component of the employer-employee relationship, which has been such a big part of the German economic model. And I would argue the German success is one of the leading economies in the world, leading export nation. The Mittelstand, all these small and medium enterprises that provide 85% of the jobs in Germany. The most jobs in Germany are not provided by the big corporations. They're provided by small and medium enterprises. 85%, it's not even close. And the social relationship between employer and employee has always been important. And you have institutions like co-determination and works councils and others that cement this relationship into institutions. That is what is being, in a sense, directly challenged by this type of work. Is there a way for Germany and other countries who are doing this to integrate these technologies in a way that preserves the social component? This is really the big question. In effect, what's happening is that corporations themselves are being redesigned. If you think about the trajectory of corporations in the post-World War II era, you had, immediately after World War II, you had these big industrial companies like Daimler and BMW, Volkswagen, in the United States, GM, Ford, IBM, Siemens, all these companies. And they pretty much did everything under the single roof of their company. Production, design, marketing, research, everything was done under this roof of this vertical company. Then about in the 1980s, new types of companies came along like Apple and Nike, and they started outsourcing production to low-wage countries, but they still kept design and marketing and such under the roof. Now these new businesses, these new corporations, they are not much more than just a website and an app with a small core of employees who are overseeing an army of freelancers and contractors and temps. Uber, for example, has only 1,000 regular employees, but they're overseeing about 400,000 drivers all over the world. Companies like Amazon. Amazon is somewhat a hybrid. It does have a lot of employees, but they're very part-time jobs. It's really not much more than that website. And, behind the wall, there's a bunch of workers working part-time jobs, not particularly good jobs in many ways. So this kind of model is really what investors like. It's what the venture capital is all funding. And this is, from the point of view of many business types, this is a good thing. Having this type of labor flexibility, having a workforce you can turn on and off, and not being responsible for things like safety nets, healthcare, and all these sorts of things. So, you can see it from the individual business's point of view, that if from the individual business point of view, you're always trying to cut costs and you're always trying to increase your price. The difference between the two is your profit margins, right? So we're in this situation where what's rational and good for an individual business, if it's done in aggregate throughout the economy, could actually be really bad for the overall economy. This sort of thing has always gone on in capitalist economies to some degree or another. It's a matter of degree. How much can your economy handle? Because what happens if we reach a point where so many workers are working freelance, contractors, temps, without enough wage, without a safety net, and they don't have enough money in their bank accounts and ATMs or My Wallet or whatever electronic money we eventually all will have. What happens if they don't have enough money to buy up the goods and services that these businesses are producing? Well, we know what happens. The economy starts to tank. That's when you start getting into recessionary cycles. You start getting into deflationary cycles, and at that point, it becomes hard to jumpstart your economy without massive influxes of input of investment from government, which in the current climate right now, especially in the U.S. and here in Germany, the austerity viewpoint has really carried the day. So we're sort of digging ourselves into a hole if we're not careful about how we implement these different technologies. It's also true that I mean, we've always thought of technology as being, at least in the longer term, job creators. I mean, the obvious counter argument to what I'm saying is, well, we had horses and plows and we replaced those with tractors, and, more jobs were created by technology. Sure, in the short term, we have what's called creative destruction. People lose their jobs, but they eventually find work in other ways. You need good job retraining, education, but they eventually will find other work and they'll find good paying jobs. That certainly has been the case in past decades. But now a lot of, what we're looking at, again, in looking at what the experts are saying, is they're saying maybe not this time. Because the ability of the technology, of the technologists to use algorithms and software and take a job and carve it up into its component parts. And this part here you hand off to an algorithm, and this part here you hand off to a robot, and this part here you hand off to some other type of automation. And the role for the human is left to push the button to start the algorithms. And that job is going to be low skill, low pay, and very precarious. I mean, you can get anybody to push that button. So why would you try to keep someone around if they want a pay increase when you can just replace them with someone else? The Pew Center did a study in which they asked 1,900 technology experts. By 2025, do you think technology will have created more jobs than it's destroyed, or will it have destroyed more jobs than it's created? And half of these technology experts answered it will have destroyed more jobs than it's created. Now, these are people, that, I'm sure if you're working in technology, you like to feel good about what you do. And so, they'd be more inclined to sort of be positive about what they do. And yet half of them are saying that it's going to destroy more jobs than it creates. And then the Oxford University did a study of over 700 occupations in the United States and found that 47% of them are will likely be eliminated over the next 10 to 20 years. 47% of jobs in the United States. They did a similar study for Germany and found that about 54% of jobs in Germany are going to be eliminated. Now, these are controversial. People are disputing these facts, disputing these studies. I don't know who's right. I don't know whose crystal ball is right. But I do know that there are a lot of people who are been involved in technology for many, many years who are saying we have some real challenges here. You have people like Bill Gates and Elon Musk who have talked about the problems with artificial intelligence. Elon Musk, in his now famous statement, who said, with artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. Okay, so these are people who are technologists themselves. I mean, Elon Musk is the greatest inventor of our times. He invented SpaceX, the sending rockets up and down and landing them in the middle of the ocean and all these sorts of things. So, I don't think we can just ignore this and just say, oh, it's all going to work out, which is what some people say. I mean, at that point, when you just say it's all going to work out, that's faith. That's what religion is about. That's not supposed to be what science and technology is about. It's just saying, oh, it's all going to work. It's always worked out in the past. I mean, I hear that a lot. Another example is 3D printing. Quite amazing technology. That you could print household goods. You can print, these machines that can print a piano if you want to make it out of carbon-based polymer resin. You can print just about anything. And so now they're starting to print cars. There's a company in Arizona called Local Motors where they're printing cars. And not only are they printing cars, but it's much more efficient to print a car than it is to build it out of metal and steel. The printed car made out of a carbon polymer has a regular car has what's called a buy to fly ratio of 20 to 1. So in other words, you need to have 20 times the amount of steel, and you machine it down. You take that steel and you get rid of most of it to produce that car. Well, with 3D printing, you need about 1 to 1. You just need the amount of material in that printer You have a little bit of excess, but not very much. So it's much more efficient. It's much more cost effective. Right now, the process is rather slow, so they can only do one car at a time instead of hundreds at a time. What's going on in an auto plant? But the experts are saying it's just a matter of time before they have that worked out. So think about it. Auto companies, these auto companies, I mentioned that this technology is not necessarily job creators. Just to give you some numbers, Facebook, for example, 12,000 people work for Facebook. Google, 50,000 work for Google. I already mentioned Uber, 1,000 people, Airbnb, 1,000 people, Twitter, 4,000 people. So you compare that to companies like IBM, Siemens, all the auto companies, they all employ hundreds of thousands of people. And so these, if somehow you can start replacing these car companies, it's going to be a big hit to the economy. And so what these, with these 3D printers, you have now companies like Apple who are saying they're going to produce cars. Because what is a car today? A car is becoming a computer on wheels. That's what cars are becoming. And who better to design the computers than Apple and other companies who do this sort of thing? So Apple will just design the computer components of it, and they'll be able to print out car parts and outsource that to Foxconn in China, which is where they make all our iPhones. And so what are auto companies going to do? How are they going to compete against this other than to become like that? And so, that's an example where now the 3D technology has amazing capabilities, but it also has the potential to eliminate a lot of jobs and a lot of companies that people depend on. If we look at productivity growth in the United States, what we found is that, between 2000 and about 2012, the productivity growth was 2.5%, which is faster than any time since the 1960s. So productivity growth is how much can each worker produce. So more workers are becoming more and more productive. They're producing more and more, and yet we're doing it without job growth. That's what's really different today, is that we're not producing jobs even though the productivity is higher than ever, and the jobs are not paying. So the average American worker for the last 25 years has not had a pay increase. Wages have been flat. That's why they started borrowing money on their house mortgages, because their pay wasn't going up. And that's what contributed to the housing bust. So this is a potential problem. Now, let's talk a little bit more about what's happening in the gig and sharing economy, the quality of jobs, and what we're seeing there. With the gig and sharing economy, Uber, Airbnb, TaskRabbit, Upwork, and all these sorts of things, they like to say you're going to be the CEO of your own business. Like Travis Kalanick, the CEO of Uber, likes to tell his drivers, "You're my partners, and you are the CEO of your own driving business." Okay. You hear this rhetoric all the time coming out of Silicon Valley. Well, let's look at what these jobs are like. If you're talking about an Uber driver, you're talking about someone who, I hear people say a lot, I talked to my Uber driver and he likes it, and it is usually a he. And yeah, that song lasts for about 6 months. And I usually say to them, ask your driver next time how long he has been a driver, because basically after 6 months, 7 months, they get tired of seeing their pay constantly cut. They get tired of, some of them have been cut off the platform because their acceptance rate is too low. Your acceptance rate for a lot of these drivers, after you've been a veteran driver for a while, you realize you're not making any money on a ride that's going to just go for a kilometer or two because you're stuck in traffic, and you don't make any money on that job, on that ride. So they refuse the short rides. And with Uber, though, if your acceptance rate is too low, they cut you off the platform. So about 6 months ago, Uber cut off the platform about 1,000 drivers just like that, without warning them. They just cut them off because the algorithm figured out their acceptance rate is too low. There's no dialogue. There's no negotiations. Oops, you're below the level, gone. And so that's what these jobs are like. You don't have any job security. You're not necessarily making very much money. For a while, the CEO of Uber was saying his drivers full-time drivers are making $100,000 a year. I mean, it didn't even pass the laugh test, and yet you had newspapers like the Washington Post that were just publishing this, like, whoa, Uber drivers make. I saw ads, in San Francisco. It says you can make so much per month, and you do the math, and it comes out to $96,000 a year. It's like, my God, that puts them in the upper 10% of income earners in the United States. They're making more than the techies in Silicon Valley. Well, finally, a few enterprising journalists went and rode with Uber drivers and asked them for their pay stubs. And lo and behold, they're not really making any more than taxi drivers. In fact, a lot of them are making less than minimum wage once you subtract their considerable costs for driving as a way of making a living. And what's more, when you ask a lot of these drivers, as I have, they're not even sure how much they're making. They're saying, well, you look at your pay stub and you've got this and you've got that. And they just say, it's good for now. And that's exactly what it is, good for now. In fact, Uber's own numbers show that half their drivers last a year on the platform, and then they leave. And about half of the drivers drive 15 hours a week or fewer. So what you're talking about here is a very temporary part-time job. That's not something you can base an economy on. I mean, it's certainly the service provided by Uber has certainly done some good. In the United States, taxi service is pretty poor in most cities. In San Francisco, where I live, it could take 30, 35 minutes for a taxi to show up out in my neighborhood in the outer Sunset. But here in Berlin, it's quite a different story. Taxi service seems to be pretty good, and Uber has had a much harder time finding a foothold here. So, I think the Uber and Lyft service is providing, Lyft is the other company in the United States, is providing a service that many people seem to really like. It's no question it's popular. But we have to really ask ourselves, is that the only criteria? And is there a way to make this job better for these drivers by either making them actual employees of Uber or creating a safety net for them? So I'm just keeping an eye on time here. The other thing that happens with a lot of these jobs, for example, if you're working for TaskRabbit or Upwork, you might have a job that lasts a couple of weeks or maybe a month or maybe just an afternoon. And so you have to always be looking for the next job. You don't have any type of job security. So while you're doing this job that lasts 2 weeks, you have to keep looking for the next job. This is the chief complaint I hear from these workers over and over again. I get so tired of looking for the next job. I never can sit still. I feel like I'm always have to be looking. Even on weekends, I can't really take time off. I can't chill out because I've got to look for my next job because the one I have is going to end in 2 days. I'm sure for a lot of you that work for a company or work for an organization, you show up to work, you work from 9 to 5, 8 to 4, you have a salary. For these workers, they don't have anything like that. They they have to, as I said, just keep hustling and hustling and hustling for the next job. And, some people do well in this type of environment. You have certain people that have that entrepreneurial mentality and spirit, and they can do okay. But there are a lot of other people who are perfectly skilled, perfectly competent, perfectly experienced. But they just don't have that entrepreneurial, get out and hustle, go, go, go mentality. And these are the ones that really have a hard time making this work. Should everyone have to have that mentality going forward in order to make a living? And that's a real big question in my mind. One of the beauties of the post-World War II economy, it had its pros and cons as well, but that many different types of people and many different skill levels could plug in at different levels and find their place, their niche in the economy. But this kind of new digital economy is making that increasingly more difficult to do. There's some other some of these is almost kind of like, if you remember the Woody Allen movie Sleeper, this sort of futuristic comedy, that dark comedy. There's some of these other types of jobs are really kind of darkly comic. There's companies, some of these are called the gig economy, but there's also now they have micro gigs and nano gigs, smaller and smaller jobs. So you have these companies where, like Amazon's Mechanical Turk, Spare 5, where you can monetize your downtime, as they call it. Why, when you're sitting there waiting for the bus or you're sitting there in line for your coffee, why waste time when you can actually be making money? You can go on your app for Mechanical Turk, and you can do things like identify photos that are used in search engines. So, you get this list of photos and you say, cat lying on its side with red ribbon, cat standing on two paws in purple hat, ladies high heels brown, ladies high heels maroon. You just identify photos and you get paid a nickel a photo for every one you do, and the rate of pay is about $2 to $3 an hour. I mean, who needs spare time? When you need extra money, you can go on Mechanical Turk, or you can go on Spare 5 or some of these other new companies that are coming on, and you can sit there and make extra money doing this. And so again, it's about the quality of work. Markets are being created everywhere and out of everything and everybody. That's what a lot of these digital technologies are trying to do. Some of the other components of this digital economy have to do with surveillance of employees. Now, a lot of these companies are incorporating software and algorithms in which, when you type on your keyboard, they're keeping track of what you're typing. When you move your mouse and you're clicking on things, they're keeping track of your mouse movements. They have now Upwork, for example. Because you have workers all over the world, how do we know what these workers are doing? We've got a technology for that. It takes screenshots on a regular basis without telling them and shows what they're doing. And that way, they call it looking over the shoulder of these workers to catch the, as they call them, cyber slackers. So we call this performance monitoring. Amazon is really big on this. They do a lot of performance monitoring of their employees, and it gets to and so think about what this means is that the algorithms basically are keeping track of you instead of you keeping track of them. So it raises the question: are we going to be tools of the machines, or are the machines going to be tools of us? Because basically these companies, they're keeping track of your performance. And if you're falling behind, they let you know, you're falling behind. They have, like a lot of the smartphones, a lot of people who deliver for a living, the smartphone is keeping track of where you're going, how fast you're getting there, and they already have the data sets of past deliveries, so they know how long it should take you to get there. And so they're keeping track of this in a way that lets you know when you're falling behind. So these are just the types of things that I think we have to really be concerned about. So anyway, let's switch now to a little bit to Germany, and because this is after all what I was here studying a lot and talking to people about and interviewing people about. The German economic model is founded, as I mentioned earlier, on a sense of solidarity, co-determination, and so these sorts of new ways of work are, in many ways, a direct challenge to this. Many Germans I've spoken to seem to believe that what's happening in the United States could never really happen here in Europe's leading economy. Yet already we see a significant increase in the number of precarious jobs. About 4 to 5% of Germans are now what are called here solo self-employed, meaning they are a business of one, and they often, many of them have low pay, very little job security. They don't know where their next job is coming from, much like in the gig economy, and they also don't benefit a lot from the social security system that is so good in many ways here in Germany. As employees that work directly for an employer. There's about 4 million Germans, 10% of the labor force, that are making less than minimum wage. And many of these workers, they seem to be in jobs such as home care workers, house cleaners, handymen, roofers, professional drivers who don't work directly for a company. Talking to some of the drivers, they're paying 600-700 euros a month for health care because there's no employer chipping in their half of the health care. So there's some holes in the German safety net system that, again, an economy can handle a certain number of these. It's a matter of how much, to what degree. And the numbers seem to be increasing. But the thing that's been interesting is I've been talking to many people from different Stiftungs who are specialized in these things. I asked them how many workers are like this, and no one seems to know. No one seems to know. Everyone's, not that many. Oh, more and more. Oh, maybe this many. Oh, maybe that many. And it seems like no one is really seriously tracking this in a way. And we don't track it well in the United States either, partly because these sorts of workers are hard to track. But it seems to me that if we don't have the numbers, we're really flying blind here. It's important that we start doing more to get the numbers. And Germany could certainly do a lot more to do this. Many of these workers don't benefit from the full Social Security support. There are some who are benefiting, for example, artists and musicians and journalists from, I'll butcher this and my German is horrible, Künstlersozialkasse? All right. Did I say it right? Sozialkasse? Yeah. I've been instructed by 10 different people. Nothing is more frustrating when they're sitting in front of you saying, no, Sozialkasse. And I'm saying, yes, Sozialkasse. No, that's not it. And they keep going over and over. And I think I'm saying it, and they think I'm not. And they just keep making you say it over and over again, and I never get it right. Anyway, so, I think there is a model there that Germany could build upon if it can muster the political will and get the organizations, the different sectors behind it. And also now, of course, there are a lot more immigrants here in Germany. And so this is going to be a surplus labor pool that many businesses who want to hire freelancers, contractors, and what have you, they'll dip into this labor pool in order to do that. So, you're going to have to find work for these workers somehow. They're going to be labor market outsiders to start with, and probably for many years. And so you're going to have these sorts of workers that are acting as a drag on the quality of jobs for the labor market insiders. From the labor union perspective, seems to be true both here in Germany. I was in Denmark, and then also in the United States. For a lot of the labor unions, for many, many years, it's always been a matter of you're either employed or you're unemployed. And if you're employed, you have a full-time job. If you're unemployed, then the goal is to get you employed. And there was really nothing in between. Part-time workers were always considered as sort of workers in a temporary phase, and the goal is to get those part-time workers fully employed. Well, more and more of these workers have been part-timers now for quite many years. Short-term contracts, temp workers, and what have you. And so more and more workers are between these two poles. They're working as part-time workers. They're maybe doing a couple of part-time jobs. And so there's a real question about whether labor unions and other labor-minded organizations should adopt a new strategy in which basically admitting that these part-time jobs are not going away. They seem to be increasing in number. And isn't it a time to make these part-time jobs okay as they are, and to put some sort of safety net beneath these part-time jobs and make them fully covered just like all the other workers are fully covered? For many workers, some workers today prefer the part-time jobs for whatever reason. Should they somehow suffer because they only want a part-time job for right now? I think these are in many ways, the important questions for Germany to look at, because the types of digital economy businesses that are coming here and want to get in here even more, they're going to look for these vulnerabilities and these weaknesses in your labor market, and they're going to hire those workers that are going to be low cost. So in some ways, by extending, I call it Künstlersozialkasse for all. How about that for a motto for Germany? By extending this, you plug the holes in the safety net, and you also will take away the incentive that exists for companies to hire the low wage workers to begin with. So, I think it's time to admit that, these sorts of jobs are here to stay. And I say this also for the United States. I mean, labor unions are also, I think, in some ways still in this same viewpoint. It's time to admit that these part-time jobs are here to stay, that the digital economy has landed, and to start preparing for that, and to do it now before it reaches more of a crisis proportion. And Germany has a number of advantages, I think, in trying to grapple with this. One, the social capitalism, as I call it here, which I compare to what we have in the United States, which is more Wall Street capitalism. As I said, a more developed social security system, co-determination, works councils. How many people know what co-determination is? When I ask that question in the United States, about 2 hands go up. For those who don't know, in Germany, for any business that has 2,000 or more employees, the workers get to elect 50% of the members of the board of directors, of the supervisory board of that business. It would be as if Walmart workers in the United States, got to elect 50% of the members of Walmart's board of directors. We laugh about it. We can't even conceive of that from the American standpoint, and yet that's just standard practice in Germany and in many countries throughout Europe. So you have co-determination, you have works councils, you have more of a culture of consultation between employer and employee. You have relatively strong labor unions here, Verdi, Annetta representing Verdi here, IG Metall, and other unions that are really trying to grapple with these issues. So I think that's a benefit. And you still have more of a valuing of what I call the visible hand of government. In the U.S., government has a pretty bad reputation these days. Here, government, no one loves government, but there's more of a sense that government does do some things. Plays an important role between the private sector and the public. So what can we do about this? Well, I've already hinted at some of it. One of the things we have to do is we have to create a universal portable safety net for all workers. So no matter how you work, what type of job, whether you're a regularly employed or a freelancer or a contractor, you have access to a safety net that is going to support you and your family. The way we could do this, it's really quite simple. You just have, for each worker, they should have what I call an individual security account. And the business that hires that worker would pay into this account a certain amount of money above the wage that would be prorated to the number of hours that you work for that business. And so you could work for multiple employers, whether it's for an afternoon or 2 days or a month. You could work for multiple employers, and you could, in a sense, collect the funds that you need in your individual security account to help you pay for your safety net. In some ways, as I said, Germany's already doing this for artists and through the Künstler Sozialkasse. But I think there's many other categories of workers that need to have this kind of support, and they don't have it right now. More and more workers are going to be working along this spectrum of work. In the U.S., we're already seeing it. More and more working part-time, not full-time. They supplement that driving some shifts for Uber or doing something on TaskRabbit or with a second or even third part-time job. So we have to, the system we have now is predicated on a worker working full-time for a single employer throughout most of their career. And that just doesn't exist for many workers today. And so it's a matter of adjusting the system that worked quite well for across the Atlantic in the post-World War II era to this new economy. And there's a role for labor unions in this too, I think, because we're going to need, there'll be between the worker and the business that wants to hire that contractor or freelancer, there's going to need to be a third entity, what we sometimes call a central benefits administrator, who acts as the intermediary between these two, and receives the funds for for the safety net, deducts it from the worker's pay, deducts it from the employer, from the business side. And so, this is something that NGOs, we don't have to leave this up to the insurance companies. I mean, the insurance companies will be chopping at the bit to get into this business because there'll be so much money there that they'll want to, make profits from. But we don't have to leave it to them. We can allow NGOs, like the United States is an organization called the Freelancers Union. They could play this role. Labor unions could play this role. Lots of different organizations could play this role. In Nordic countries, labor unions already oversee the unemployment insurance system. So this could be a model to build upon. I also think we have to look at more nonprofit tech development. There's, for example, they're trying to create, use the ride-sharing app to create more carpooling in the United States. And we need more carpooling. There's too many single occupant cars driving back and forth across the Bay Bridge and the Golden Gate Bridge and everywhere else, trying to get to work. So these companies are coming up with a way where, you can use the app to connect with each other, But once you do that, you don't need the app anymore. You don't need the company. So there's no profit in it for these companies. But if an NGO does it, if the government were to sponsor a contest, for example, to get some young entrepreneurial developers to develop this type of app for the nonprofit sector, then it would supplement what the for-profit sector is doing. So I think we need to really start expanding the range of people who are creating these apps, and in a way that's being done so that it's not just for the for-profit sector that's making all the money. Maybe I should just stop there. I mean, why don't we just, we'll do questions and answers. Thank you. I should have given you a 2-minute warning so you could think of your questions, I'm sure, but my apologies. Oh, there's questions already. So we'll have a microphone if you can speak into the microphone.
Is it on? Okay. Stephen, I was at a concert a couple of years ago here in Berlin, not far from the neighborhood I live in, Prenzlauer Berg, and it was Wilco. And after playing for about 2 hours and doing 2 encores, Jeff Tweedy said, well, this is going to be our last song because I know you all have to get up in the morning. And some lady screamed out, no, we're freelancers! Full of pride.
Right.
I live and work in Prenzlauer Berg. I work in an office with 4 other guys who are also freelancers. I'm a writer, I'm a journalist. I'll do a translation or an edit if it's interesting stuff. Do some public speaking as well. Another guy, he does some communication work for an NGO and works for a cultural blog. Another guy is an adjunct professor. Another guy does IT. All up and down the street we're in the building I'm in, most of the people I know actually in Prenzlauer Berg are some kind of freelancers. I'm also, 2 of the 4 people in our office are members of the Kunstsozialkasse. We have kids. We have flexible time to pick up our kids or if they're sick. We have our own schedules. Much of what you say about freelancers also applies to us. We probably make less than someone who does a 9-to-5 job and has been doing it for 30 years. What the future holds in terms of jobs is a little bit more unstable and unpredictable, etc. But we would take this model any time over the 9-to-5 jobs. And it seems like it's the kind of the model of the future. I'm not contradicting anything you say at all. I agree with everything you say. But we see this as the preferable and the more attractive model of work for many different ways. I mean, is it mutually exclusive, or is the only difference the Kunstsozialkasse? Every time you mentioned freelance work, it was really kind of in a pejorative way, as if there wasn't something much more positive there that could be gotten out of it, also for the future of work.
Yeah, if it's working for you, great, do it. And if you like it, I think that's the point, is that we want to set up a system where someone like you can do that, and if it's working for you, continue to do it. I mean, you're doing it in Germany, so it's quite different than doing it in the United States, where you don't have really any support. You don't even have injured worker compensation. You get injured, you're on your own. In my book, I have a story about this fellow Fritz Ellenberg, who was installing cable as a contractor for Comcast and RCN in Boston. He got injured, and he didn't even know that the company wasn't going to cover his medical bills. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, Germany can be a leader here in creating a system where people like you who want to do it can work that way. And then even for the occupations in Germany that aren't covered and don't have access to some of the supports that you have, covering those as well. That's what I'm suggesting. So I don't see any contradiction at all. I mean, I'm trying to give a sense of, if we don't have the type of support that you have, what can happen? And the companies who want to come here, they're going to look to get around these sorts of, they're going to try to hire workers that aren't covered by these sorts of things because their labor costs are going to be lower. So, you want to plug those holes now while you still have a chance before the number of those sorts of workers get higher and higher. So thanks for giving one for the freelancers.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I have many colleagues, as do many of our peers here, that work for the university as part-time labor. They are not excited about being part-time laborers. They don't have health insurance. They have to teach at 3 or 4 different institutions. Their workload is much bigger than the professors who teach full-time. And every year, they wait for their contract. So the stress that they experience because of the uncertainty, and many of these individuals have children, is tremendous.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's happening in Germany, but in the United States, the flexibility comes with great cost. But the question that I wanted to ask you is, what is, vis-a-vis the government, for example, the more freelance work or the more jobs related to new technology developments are created, the less people are going to make. What is that doing to the tax base? Because these individuals don't have health insurance, so somebody's paying for that, and that somebody is tax dollars. But then if the tax dollars are collapsing because less and less people are making more money, this is also suicide for the government. So from that point of view, could you please expound on that?
Yeah, I mean, once you get into that situation, there's all sorts of knock-on effects that kick in. Not only does your tax base start shrinking, I mean, some of the contractors may or may not be paying their taxes. It's a really hard thing to track, but some of the tax experts are saying that the U.S. is missing out in hundreds of billions of dollars in tax revenue every year because the contractors and freelance just simply aren't paying their taxes. And at a certain point, you overwhelm the ability of the system to go after them. But then in addition, as you say, if they don't have health care, they go to the emergency waiting room in order to get health care. And that's extremely expensive health care. For some of these workers, if they have children, if they can't, I mean, the United States is one of the few countries in the world with no paid sick leave. You have 40 million private sector workers with no paid sick leave. So that means when they get sick, they either have to stay home and self-subsidize their sick leave, or they show up to work sick and infect all their coworkers. And a lot of them tend to work in restaurants. So when you're in a U.S. restaurant, you don't know that the person serving you or cooking your food isn't sick and can't afford to stay home. And so they're infecting you with whatever illness they have. So, I mean, there's all sorts of knock-on effects like this that need to be taken into account when we start, adding up costs and benefits and these sorts of things. So,
by way of background, I've been a journalist and freelancing since about 1987.
Here in Germany?
No, for the past 8 years in Germany. And I've got a part-time job here that is great. But most of the work has been, it occurs to me, making somebody else look good. I mean, being rather invisible, ghostwriting, that kind of thing. And I guess my question is, have you turned your lens to publishing in the United States, newspapers, magazines, and books, especially, in terms of Google and Amazon? And, are you familiar with the German book price law that protects bookstores? That it allows it gives the publisher the right to name the price of the book and to have that book be established on the retail side for the first year and a half of the book's life.
So Amazon can't come in and undercut that?
Right.
Wow.
I mean, have you turned your lens to it?
Well, to the publishing industry, certainly, because the publishing industry is basically being devastated, has been for a number of years, and many people there are working freelance. It was one of the ironies of doing this book, because some of the people in the publishing industry would sort of whisper to me, like, "Yeah, it's happening here." And I remember doing a radio interview, even beyond publishing books, for an NPR station. And, the person's walking me to the green room, and she says, "Oh, what are you here for?" I said, and I give her the elevator speech of what, the 30-second version of what I'm doing here. And she says, "Yeah, it's happening right here, too." So, I mean, it's happening throughout all of these, publishing, radio, TV, and it's, I think you lose a lot of talent this way. There's not a sense of cultivating talent anymore in these sorts of industries, and I think it's a qualitative loss. I have a quote in the book from Tina Brown, if anybody know Tina Brown, media mogul, and I'll have to paraphrase, but she says something like, a lot of my friends are working this way now, freelancing, and she says, and the first 6 months they all say how great it is, but a year later no one's singing that song anymore, or no one's writing that story anymore. They're all talking about what it's like to slide up and down the pole like a greasy pig to get what you need. This is Tina Brown talking. And, so I think a lot of people are realizing that this could seriously undermine the economy in many ways. Because remember, what I mentioned earlier, if not enough people have enough money to buy up the goods and services being produced, you get into a situation of what I call an economic singularity, where you reach a tipping point where the economy starts to implode. And because too much of the wealth that the society is producing is being extracted by a small group of people, the one percenters or whatever you want to call them, and not enough is being broadly distributed to a middle class. And so, think about however you want it through whatever lens. I think you can make an argument that that process has already sort of begun. The amount of goods and services being bought up by the middle class historically is much lower today than it was 20 years ago. And the amount of goods and services being bought up by the upper 10% is higher than it was. So, and they don't buy, there's not as many of them, so they don't buy as much. So these are the challenges, the dilemmas that are ahead.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for the lecture. And I've heard you about 2 or 3 months ago, and I asked you about learning and teaching process. And today I'd like to make the second question. How to find a model it fits in the different cultures, like German is totally different as in USA, to cooperate with 3 forces that concurrate the development of technology. It's fact. In about a few years, the machine will be just like us. It's a fact. How to deal with the financial market and in business and in a globalized world, the role of firms like Apple, IBM, or Mercedes or VW, will be the government in the future or not?
Will those companies be the government?
Yeah. Because if we accept that freelancers will be the most of 60 or 70% of the jobs, then the force of the companies will be really very, very big.
Well, I'm not sure my crystal ball sees that far in advance. I think, in any vibrant economy, you want to have different sectors that have the ability to push their agenda and try to win, in a sense. And you want to have a separation of powers and a balance of it. So, private sector, public sector, consumers, companies, big size, little size. A vibrant economy needs to have all those, and with none of them being too influential. An economy is a very fragile thing. I think we don't appreciate that sometimes. We just think it should just work. And in fact, but if you look through human history, you can see times where it worked very badly. And we know that, if we don't get the right balance, things can go very, very wrong. So to me, the main component that we need is some degree of democracy in the political system, in the economic system. That's why I'm a big fan of things like co-determination, Works Council here in Germany and Sweden and elsewhere, because it puts a degree of democracy, of accountability, and it creates more of a balance of power within the economy. Now, how this is going to play out in the future, I just don't know. I see some trends that are very worrisome. And so that's what I'm trying to highlight, but I'm not going to try and predict, how it's going to play out. It's too complicated.
Your presentation really just accentuated in my mind that what we really need is a social safety network that completely breaks from employment with a particular employer. And I think this means two things. One is a negative income tax, which in fact was first mooted in the administration of Richard Nixon and actually experimented with in the state of New Jersey. And the second is a healthcare system that is financed from general revenue and open to everybody without contributions. In other words, a system financed like it is in Great Britain and the United States. And I don't think that either for Germany or the United States, any sort of system that is based on this Bismarckian Kassen system as modified during the Weimar Republic is going to get down to the basic needs.
Okay. Well, I agree. We need to have, the thing that I like about the German healthcare system, comparing it to the U.S. healthcare system, is that the German healthcare system basically has about 200 private insurance companies, just like we have private insurance companies in the United States. But the big difference is that here in Germany, they're nonprofits for the most part. In the U.S., it's for-profit. And it turns out that, I'm all for for-profits. I'm not in any way, this is not about being against making a profit, but it just turns out that the incentives of a for-profit when it comes to healthcare are kind of perverse. Because the goal of any for-profit is to lower costs, which means when it comes to healthcare, you give as few services as possible, and to increase your price as much as the market will bear, and the difference between the two is your profit. Well, in healthcare, increasing your price means higher insurance premiums. And so, it's just simply the case that I think it's the wrong model to have a for-profit healthcare system. And it's not even just a matter that it's more expensive for individuals, but the U.S. is spending about 17% of our gross domestic product on healthcare. That's a huge amount. Germany is spending about 8.5%, 9%, maybe 10%. So we're spending twice as much money per capita on healthcare to cover about 85% of our population. Germany is spending less money to cover, close to 100% of the population, and all the metrics of health and everything else in the U.S. are worse than they are here and many other European countries. But it's and Germany doesn't have the same system as the UK or Sweden, the single payer system. Germany has this kind of mixed hybrid of a private system, but it's a nonprofit system. So I think this is a good model in my view. And, there's problems with it. You have to always work out the problems, but it's a matter of whether the basic model is something that is workable, or if it's just has the wrong incentives built into it. I think the U.S. system has the wrong incentives.
So, Steven Hill, thank you so much for your comments this evening. So, a theme that I'm hearing throughout this, and others could hear this as well, is one of exploitation. And I'm wondering if you see it through that lens. So someone recently told me a nice phrase, which was, if the service is free, then you're the product.
You say that again?
If the service is free, then you're the product. So if Gmail is free, you're the product.
Because they're gathering data.
Because they're gathering your data.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about that. Yeah.
Right. So my question has to do with, without getting too far into, say, Marxist theory or materialism, we had a huge industrial revolution where materials, goods could be mass-produced, and we have a Marxist labor theory, etc., and our friends from Verdi know this very well. And the question is now, if we have a new means of production, or a new means of mass reproduction, meaning that digital data is infinite, essentially, Is the problem based, is there a system of exploitation here, and is the problem based in the technologies we're using, the nature of the digital technologies, or is it a political social problem, as you see it, the gig economy? And then lastly, as a follow-up question, does Bernie Sanders have your telephone number?
Yeah, Bernie's on my speed dial. I think it's predominantly, not 100%, but predominantly a political and social question. That the technology, I believe, if we have the right rules around them, can be made to work to our benefit. But I say that, when you have people like Bill Gates and Elon Musk warning about artificial intelligence, by 2040, artificial intelligence machines will have 1 billion more than the brain power of we humans at current rate of growth. And so is there a point at which we have to say maybe some of these technologies, can we refuse a technology? That's an interesting question that I think needs to be thought about, because maybe some of these technologies. I mean, we tend to be very pro technology in Germany, United States, and think we can make these technologies work. But yet we have invented technologies that we've put rules around: atomic weapons, for example, chemical weapons, cloning. Steroids in sports. We tried steroids in sports. We had more home runs being hit than ever, and then they decided, this is really is violating some core value about how we're supposed to conduct athletics. And then if you move that thought to labor, we've outlawed certain types of labor: child labor, slave labor. Should we add precarious labor to that list? Do we want to take this grand experiment and find out what happens if we just allow jobs to go away and atrophy and take over by the robots, and the robots are controlled by a small elite who either invented them or bought them and now use that technology how they want? I don't pretend to know what the answer to those questions are, but I think these are the questions we need to start asking, and not just in a haphazard way. I think that we need to start really thinking about whether these technologies are, or some of them might create more problems than it's worth. I don't know if exploitation is the right word. I think in terms of more of macroeconomies and what we know has worked about a macroeconomy in the post-World War II era, and whether it's going to undermine those values, those economic principles, and whether certainly they can be exploitative, but I'm thinking more in terms of those economic principles. Is one last question?
Well, Stephen, I didn't know that I would introduce you and now I have the last question. But I would like to add on you, if the service is free, you are the product. We did not talk yet about the power of collecting data and what that means to democracy and what that means to business, to the future of business. How do you make business if there is 1, 2, 3, what is oligopole in English? Is it the same? Several monopolies? Mm-hmm. That you have big companies that know all the people's longings, all the desires, all the work they do, all the pictures they publish, all everything. So from their tax they send to the public service, to the tax administration, from everything.
Right.
Just everything. So there is an imbalance of power of knowledge. And I think that also this is a very important issue to the future of economy. And we did not talk yet about, and I'm really keen to know what people here think about that, when we talk about German American relations that should be rather easy in comparison to the global relations of work and business, but here it's still difficult enough to find some regulations, some basic standards we could agree on. So how do we find these standards? What do we do about the future of work and business in that sense of the imbalance of data? That is the one side, and I would like to add something to my neighbor in Prenzlauer Berg. There are also other people, not only freelancers in the Prenzlauer Berg, but I would just like to point out that we should take the chances of digitalization for everyone. So that means for those who are freelancers and those who have a normal contract. Because I think the chances of flexibility of work, you know, when do you start, can you do home office and all this, should be accessible to everyone. So let's take the good parts, but really find solutions for these difficult issues.
Right. Here, here. You know, in terms of the data, some have proposed that we should own our data. The companies should not have automatic access to the data, and we get to sell it to the companies if we want to. You know, it seems to me one of these things that sounds nice on paper, but it probably impractical in terms of putting into place, because probably your data wouldn't be worth very much, and so most people wouldn't be bothered trying to actually sell it. It's sort of like, you know, when you get those settlements that, you know, you have been identified as someone who bought a Microsoft product and you're eligible for $4.20 of this settlement kind of thing. You know, this is one of the big questions that we have to settle, don't we? I don't know what the right policy would be. I would think that somehow they should not be able to just have our data and do whatever they want with it and sell it, or, you know, use it however they want. And yet this is the status quo right now. The thing that really strikes me, I have this part in my book where I describe ads, you know, the ads that we have now on our web pages. And it really shows you what this technology is capable of. You know, so like, let's say you go and visit a web page. And what happens when you visit that web page is that behind that wall in the cloud, they identify you. They say, this is Annette Mulberg who's coming to this web page. Okay, who out there wants to advertise to her? And so they send this message out to all these advertisers. And these advertisers start, you know, they immediately look at your profile based on where you've been. They get a sense of who you are, what sometimes well-defined, sometimes not defined so much. And then they start bidding against each other to put an ad on your webpage. And it goes back and forth, bidding. And then at a certain point, that ad appears on your webpage. And all that happens in the time of an eye blink. Mm-hmm. This is happening in the time of an eye blink. And so this is kind of, you know, the direction that these sorts of technologies are going, that we all just sort of are passive experiencing these technologies, and we haven't yet reached a point where we are actively taking control of these technologies. And so it seems to me that this is something that legislators need to weigh in on, but unfortunately in the United States, I mean, most of the legislators are completely, or maybe not completely, but largely ignorant of these sorts of technologies. And so it seems like the legislation, the government is always several steps behind what's happening with the technology. So on that cheery note, thank you. Thanks for coming, and I'll be around.